Hi, this is Peter Godinez with KEDY TV, and we are here at the Umpqua Bank, and it's really a special day. It's the day after the elections, and we are really charged up. And again, one of my favorite segments, they're all favorites, is my time with George Miller, who I'm sure, I don't know, did you go to bed late, early? Because
I was up till 3 o'clock. I left the last party about midnight. Then I had to do my second job, which is to write the election report before I went to bed.
Wow.
About 3 o'clock, and then this morning our producer dragged me out of bed.
Just physically. Wake up, wake up!
Get down to the studio and be prepared. Steady.
That's what I called say,
Right.
wake up Oxnard.
Wake up, back up. Well, the reason I'm wearing a red shirt this morning, it's not because of the state, it's because of the national thing. There was a wave swept across America yesterday, taking the control of the Senate away from the Democrats, giving it to the Republicans. I hope they do a better job than they did last time. Increasing the majority in the House of Representatives by a substantial margin, most since 1946, when it was very strong. Increasing the number of governorships under Republican control, even including states like Maryland, which is about as red as you can get. Now, contrast that red victory nationally with California.
We're not going to change clothes right now.
I'm not going to change the clothes.
Actually, get to see
it's
your
a whole
abs
different
and-
story. They're very, very blue. Basically, the Democrats
Yes.
own California. Every single statewide race, they're ahead. Now, normally they win 3-2. There's a few races that weren't 3-2, which I'll explain later. But now we get into what you're really interested in, Oxnard and Ventura County. First of all, Mayor Flynn won an election by a huge margin, 60% of the vote.
6-0. Wow.
Last week at the city council, he walked by and I said, Tim, I predict you're going to get 60% of the vote.
That makes you kind of a soothsayer.
That makes me damn lucky. That was a wild guess. You
At
know.
least you admit it.
It's a gimmick. You know, people that are prognosticators that call elections and all that, it's a gimmick. You know,
Right,
it really
right.
means nothing. All it means is when the votes are counted, what's actually there. Doesn't make you any more of a man or any smarter to predict the election within 2%. The question is, do you understand the dynamics behind it, how it got there? That's really what's most important.
Oh, it is.
And we're dynamic. In Oxnard, basically what the voters decided is to continue what they've been doing, for better or worse. You know, Carmen Ramirez was the big vote getter and won hands down in the council, and that meant that everyone else was fighting for one seat. There were 4 contenders, 1 seat was gone, 3 does not go into 1. Right?
That's
So we
true.
had 3 strong contenders. We had Steve Huber, who probably is the victor, but not for sure right now.
Right.
Right behind him is Bert Perillo. I left Bert's party at midnight last night, and they were sitting in the car like this, you know, they didn't know what to
Wow.
believe, because they're behind, but not that far behind. Bert said, you know, it's almost better if I was way behind, at least I could sleep better.
Interesting comment.
I told him, just go home and get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And then Aaron Starr, who spent more than anyone's ever spent in the history of Oxnard for an election, $100,000, was 4th. It was only good for 14% of the vote. I'm not sure what that comes out to per vote. Can you calculate that for me? It's $100,000, 14.
Yep, now you were the mathematician.
I am not on the fly.
Good guess. Just pretend like you know what you're doing.
Exactly, right. Other races, the other really big race in the county was the assembly race of Jackie Irwin versus Rob McCoy. Right now, Rob's behind 1,800 votes. I don't see how he's going to recover it because the remaining votes that haven't been counted yet are provisional ballots and some absentee ballots. Now, traditionally, provisional ballots are filled out if you get to the polling place and they don't have your name there. That means either you're not registered at all, or you're registered in the wrong place, or something like that. And those votes are usually Democrat. And with that many uncounted provisional ballots, it looks like that Robert's not going to win and Jackie's going to win.
You're taking like almost like a stock market type of thing. You're seeing the trends.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Right. Other
But
races
this
were
really
more
good.
lopsided. Das Williams won by a big margin against Ron DeBlau, who didn't run a really aggressive campaign at all, actually. Scott Wilk kicked butt. He got over 60% of the vote up in the Simi area and north of there, so that was pretty strong. And then Lois Capps won re-election by her traditional margins against, less. That was her smallest winning margin ever
I was
against
gonna say.
Chris Mitchum.
Yeah.
Chris happens to be the son of Robert Mitchum, the
They
famous
look very
actor.
similar.
Very
I
similar.
get them mixed up. How did you know so young?
But he got actually 47-point-something% of the vote, which is way better than previous opponents have done. So Lois's margin was down a little bit, which is typical of what happened in some of the state races also. Other things to look out, The lieutenant governor race, secretary of state, and all that, basically all Democrat. The only one that was even close was Pete Peterson, the secretary of state, got 48% versus Padilla's 53%. And Peterson's an extremely popular, bipartisan type guy. That's probably why. Also, Ashley Swearingen, a relatively unknown down here, got a similar margin against Yee. I think, I'm not sure if Yee is related to the senator who was suspended for dealing in arms trafficking. I don't know.
Kind of
if
hard.
they're
Sure,
related or not.
Yee is not a real unusual.
Yeah, it probably didn't help that her name was similar. I'm not sure if she's the wife of the
Right.
fellow or not. Now, as far as the propositions were very important also. The big water bond won by a very large margin. There were some opponents who were against it because it wasn't all for water. A lot of it was actually for things other than water. About $5 billion wasn't for water, about $2.5 billion was for. That was the main opposition, but people really wanted even the $2 billion very badly, so it passed by a good margin. And then Proposition 2, the budget rainy day thing, passed by a margin, wide margin. That was a bipartisan supported proposition also. The healthcare rates thing failed. Now you would think that having control over healthcare rates would be something people wanted, but if you got into the mechanics of it, it really wasn't so good. So it lost, probably for good reason. And the bill basically to have doctors drug tested and make negligence things stronger, lost probably because of AMA opposition also. Criminal sentencing bill, which reduces sentences for certain offenses, won fairly big, which surprised me really. And then the Indian casinos proposition also failed. Those things, if anything, were just as important as people running for office because they're major policy changes that would be implemented if any one of these was passed. Those are pretty important things. Every single judge won without fail.
Right.
Now, a little perspective on that. Back in 2010, I was trying to evaluate the judges and who they were and all that. And I talked to Steve Hintz, who's a retired judge and
Yes.
current
Someone
elected
listening to his wife,
politician.
Catherine.
I have a
Yeah.
lot of respect for Steve. And I said, Steve, tell me about the judges. And he just kind of smiled and he said, well, he said, first of all, no judge ever loses unless he has an opponent. And most don't have opponents. So you vote yes or no, and people usually vote a majority yes. He said he could think of any judge that ever lost the election. He says basically women get slightly higher votes, people with strange names get slightly lower votes. I said, what would happen if one ever lost? He says, they just appoint another one.
It's an interesting category is because a voter, you step into the polls and you feel like you're making an educated guess with that. And
Well, judges don't campaign.
no,
I hardly ever see a judge at a campaign event. You hardly ever see a judge advertise. The way it works is the bar gets together, which is the Association of Lawyers, and they recommend people who are almost invariably accepted and put on the ballot. So the bar is really controlling who our judges are to a large
it's
extent.
interesting because I had the wonderful privilege of seeing Steve and his lovely bride Catherine last night, and he can correct me if I'm wrong because he knows where I live. But I asked him about that same thing, and he goes, I don't really know one of the judges. And I go, Steve, I'm supposed to know two? So again,
Yeah.
it's just an interesting thing. You step into the ballot, what do you do? Because you're not
What
really
do
sure.
you do about it?
So next subject, sorry for that.
Right. As far as the school board, I'm trying to find my school board numbers. I don't see them handy here, but basically, Edmonds won. He's the guy that you interviewed recently. He won pretty
Wayne
handily,
Edmonds.
right? The biggest vote getter on the elementary school was my wife's old principal, Deborah Cordes.
Yes.
Did very well.
Yes.
But basically, there were some incumbents that are not there anymore, which is pretty
Seem to
significant.
be some changes, as you'll see, some new blood, if you want to look
A
at it.
little bit of new blood, yeah. So that's basically kind of a wrap up on the election. If you want more details, we publish all of the winners and links to the Secretary of State site and the County Elections Board, which is excellent when the site is up and running. It wasn't for a while last night, unfortunately.
Now, did we strategically leave the Congress person out, or did I just kind of fall asleep?
Well, Julia Brownlee, I talked
Right.
about that already. yeah.
Okay, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure because I didn't
Yeah.
hear much
But
about
there
that.
were three relevant elections in the region. One was
Right.
District 26, which was Julia Brownlee, the incumbent, versus Jeff Gurrell, and that was only 500 votes apart, as I mentioned earlier. And then right above that, Tony Strickland ran against Steve Knight, both Republicans, which is very unusual.
Interesting.
Because
Didn't know
it's a
this.
very conservative area, so the two top finishers were both Republicans. Strickland is very well known in the South County part and had run against Julia Brownlee, decided he didn't want to try that again, so he thought he'd run in a safer district. And it was too safe, it turned out, because two Republicans got in and Steve Knight won.
Now, so I know, like you said with the assembly race, pretty much, it's not, you can call it the trends, but with Bromley and Gorell, is that
pretty
one that's
close.
pretty
It's
close
really
still?
close.
So
So-
nobody's saying, hey, you know.
It's only like 500 votes. 500 votes can be decided in a matter of hours
Right.
by opening up some ballots. So it's not a race you want to call right now.
And the same thing with Irwin and Coy.
Well,
It's
Irvin's
just-
a little different. That was about 500, 600 votes last time
No,
I
you're
looked
right.
at it, and
No,
then
it's-
it
I
increased.
remember.
It was 1,800 when I looked early this morning. The trend is not looking that promising, so it's less likely that he'll win as possible. And I think I mentioned that Lois Capps won over Mitcham. That's another congressional election,
Right,
District
and that's
24,
where
just
that one.
north of us, and where we're sitting right here is in that district, by the way.
Yeah.
Because
it's-
of the crazy
it's
way they draw the lines, the gerrymandering and stuff like that. And some people are also interested in the District 30 race, which is the West Valley. It's a fellow by the name of Mark Reed who ran against the Democrat incumbent and lost big also. So that's all the area congressional races that are within striking distance. of
Right,
here.
and I know one of the topics that we covered a lot, and
Mhm.
again, we're doing it for segment or just comment, was the Measure M, which we got both sides real hard.
Lost
It is-
big, yeah.
So I don't know if you want to comment on that. your
Well,
thoughts, or-
it's been covered very well here before, but Measure M was a business tax, and the biggest objection people had is they didn't feel enough stakeholders were considered, but the proponents of that hotly dispute that. But the other problem is it had no real cap. There's no way to control the amount once that is voted on. So business was pretty much lined up against it. Jim Hensley, who won big last night,
Mhm.
was lined up against it. Only one person who was a supporter of it won re-election, that was John Sharkey.
It's
And
interesting.
he wasn't even the top vote getter, even though he's mayor. So,
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into that, so on both sides,
yeah, a
individuals.
huge amount of effort.
You know, and
Mhm.
you know, the big question I think we raised to Kennedy in the event it loses, what are you going to do now? Now that's something. that
Now it's
becomes a
lost. So
question.
they obviously need more revenue than they have, so that they have to come up with some way that's acceptable to the community to figure out how to raise that. And maybe get a little more involved this time than last time.
Yeah, that'd be good. And so, anything else? There was just so much. I was there last night, actually seeing the raw votes coming in. You know, Max and I were there seeing the suitcases of ballots actually, rolling down the assembly park. And we saw the first few votes come up.
Well, it's interesting. I was listening on KTLA last night. They had very good election coverage, by the way. And there was a lady there from Santa Barbara, one from Ventura County. She says, I don't know what the big deal is about dragging these votes out in Ventura County. We have them done within a couple of hours in Santa Barbara, because everything is transmitted electronically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, interestingly enough, in Ventura County it is too, but they don't rely on it. When
Yeah.
I've been a poll watcher several times, most of the areas in central Oxnard and north of the freeway, and the voting machines right now, when you finish a ballot, it scans the ballot,
Right.
immediately tabulates results, puts them on a little cassette, and there's also an electronic hookup that sends it to headquarters. But they also take the actual ballots and put them in a suitcase, like you
Uh-huh.
said, and they drive them up with an escort,
Right.
sometimes a police escort,
Yeah.
to the headquarters, and then they count them laboriously, thinking that's more reliable, but it's also a lot slower. So the question is, why couldn't they do it like Santa Barbara, tabulate electronically, then do a backup to check? I
You know,
don't, I'm not a technician, I couldn't tell you why.
It's interesting because I'm a believer in technology, but what Max and I saw there last night was an opportunity for a social gathering. When you think about it, what was actually taking place is everything everybody worked for, the strategies, the people who died for the votes.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody said, God, if I were a candidate, I'd be here. And because it's the first votes you get a chance to see instantaneously. But
The
it
candidates are
was
so
social.
busy with their support. I went to parties for 5 different people last night.
Yeah.
Steve Huber, Marianne Rooney, Brian McDonald,
Wow.
Bert Perillo, and Rob McCoy. That's all I
You
could
had
do
a
one
busy
night.
night tonight.
And
last night.
Gorell and Brownlee didn't invite me to their event. Evidently, we don't rate with them, and they don't like the fact that I publish their voting records either. So that's probably why I didn't get it.
Hey, we'll get in. So,
Right.
anything else? I know there's a lot, but let me ask
That's
you.
an awful
summary
lot.
of it was pretty much.
Well,
that
it
was
shows again that we do have free elections to the extent that people can campaign, pretty much spend what they want right now to do that within certain constraints. There's no one throwing people off the ballot like in certain foreign countries.
Mhm.
However, though, there's an awful lot of control over the communication process, particularly the press. And one of the reasons we started Citizens Journal was to try to create more balance approach. And I think you'll agree
You're
that
doing a
today's
good
session
job.
was pretty balanced. And we don't feel that all media are like that, which is why we started the Citizens Journal, to give people a better idea of what's actually happening, what the issues are, who the personalities are, and what abuses, if any, occur. That's why we're here. CitizensJournal.us and Facebook, Citizens Journal, Ventura County.
No, I love it, and this is a really exciting segment because we were able to see the strategies that people took, and here are the results, and here you are.
Here we are.
Summarizing.
Right, once again, thank you.
Will do. And so this is, again, a wonderful segment with George Miller, Peter Godinez, your ambassador with KDY TV, or Wake Up Oxnard, or Good Morning Oxnard, whatever you feel like at the moment. Until next time, bye-bye.